Don't fly that jet. The scream shattered the heavy Florida heat like glass underfoot. People turned, but not in concern, in confusion. Some chuckled. One man pulled out his phone, amused. Security guards froze, uncertain. Who yells like that at an airport? An 8-year-old girl in a grass-stained sundress was sprinting barefoot across the tarmac of Tampa Executive Airport, hair flying, face streaked with dirt and desperation. Maya, her mother, screamed from behind, chasing her, panic rising in her voice. Maya, stop. But Maya didn't stop. She ran harder, her little arms pumping, her voice raw from shouting, "The rudder bolts! 2 are missing. Please stop the plane." At the far end of the runway, a sleek Gulfstream G800 vibrated with power, its engines spinning faster with each second. The sunlight gleamed off its polished body. At the top of the steps stood Carter Ellison, tall, poised, his tailored suit undisturbed by the chaos behind him. He turned when he heard the voice and saw her, a child alone on the runway, pointing at his jet with wide, terrified eyes. The crowd behind her, a mix of ground crew, airport personnel, and VIP guests, stood stunned, watching the scene like it was some strange performance. Carter raised a hand, signaling to pause the boarding. The engine softened. The steps lowered with a hiss. He descended slowly, each step deliberate. Maya stopped only when she was a few feet from him. She bent over, hands on her knees, breath ragged. "Please, mister, you can't go. The plane, it's not safe." Her voice cracked. Her small hands pointed toward the tail. "I heard it on the radio. There's something wrong. It's not okay." Carter knelt slightly, eye level with her. "You heard what, sweetheart?" She pulled out a walkie-talkie from her backpack, cracked, scuffed with a wire antenna barely hanging on. "I listen every day on the maintenance frequency. Today, it sounded wrong. The signal, it pulsed like it wasn't natural." He blinked, not at her words, but the intensity in her face. Not the words of a rehearsed child. Something deeper. Something learned. Before he could respond, Rachel Williams, Maya's mother, burst through the crowd. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, grabbing her daughter. "She has this obsession with radios, airplanes. Her father, he used to." She stopped. Her voice faltered. Carter stood. "Who was her father?" Rachel's face paled. "Coleman Williams. He worked for your company 5 years ago. The TriStar crash." Carter froze. "I remember Coleman." Maya looked up. "He taught me to listen." Rachel pulled her daughter gently. "Come on, we're leaving." Carter hesitated, then turned to the co-pilot. "Run one more systems check. Manual override, especially the tail." The man gave a strange look but nodded. 10 minutes later, the plane took off. Maya, her mother Rachel, and her grandfather Frank stood watching from the edge of the fence. They did not board because Frank, once an Air Force engineer, had quietly pulled the family's names off the manifest after Maya's outburst. No one argued with him. 40 minutes later, the headlines erupted. Breaking: private jet crashes in the Everglades. 4 survivors found alive among them. Carter Ellison, Rachel Williams, Frank Williams, and an unnamed staffer who'd missed the flight due to a scheduling error. The rest, the board members, 2 flight crew, and the company's lead safety officer, dead. In the Williams' modest living room, the TV screen glowed like a ghost. Aerial shots of wreckage, fire crews, blackened earth. Rachel stood frozen, hands over her mouth. Frank's arms were crossed, jaw tight, eyes locked on the news crawl. FAA suspects mechanical failure. Further investigation pending. Maya sat on the carpet, legs crossed, her walkie-talkie silent in her lap. No blinking, no tears, just stillness. She had screamed. She had begged. She had told them something was wrong and they hadn't listened. But now the world had to. They watched the news like people watching their own story rewritten by strangers. The television showed the twisted wreckage in the Everglades. Dark smoke still curling from the ground. Rescue crews moved slowly, methodically. A red ticker blinked at the bottom of the screen. Breaking. 4 survivors. Identities confirmed. Carter Ellison, Rachel Williams, Frank Williams. Staff Assistant Rachel sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her face pale, eyes fixed. Frank stood behind her, arms folded, jaw working in silence. And Maya, 8 years old, legs swinging above the carpet, held her walkie-talkie tight to her chest. Not like a toy, like a lifeline. "She saved us," Frank said finally. His voice was low, but it filled the room. "If we had been on that flight," Rachel whispered, "I told her to be quiet. I told her to stop. She didn't." That night, no one slept. The next morning, the knock on the door was polite but firm. Frank opened it to find 2 men in black suits. Badges. "We're with the National Transportation Safety Board," one said. "We understand your granddaughter may have issued a warning before the crash." Rachel blinked. "She's a child." The taller agent replied evenly, "Sometimes children hear what adults ignore." They sat in the dining room. Maya sat on a booster cushion, her little legs too short for the chair. She wore an oversized hoodie, sleeves swallowing her hands. "I heard the tone," she said softly. It wasn't normal. It pulsed like something was echoing back. That's not supposed to happen on VHF unless someone's messing with the signal. The agents looked at each other. Frank added, "She was listening on her old frequency scanner. Her father built it. The kid's been playing with radio bands since she was 5. One agent leaned forward. "Do you still have the recording?" Maya shook her head. "It wasn't recording, just live signal." "But I wrote it down," she added, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper with squiggly numbers and notes only she could read. They took it, photographed it, and left. No promises, no reassurance. Just quiet tension and the scent of burnt coffee. That afternoon, Carter Ellison appeared on TV. He looked different, his face stitched near the eyebrow, his voice slower, more careful. The flight encountered catastrophic mechanical failure. "I want to thank the first responders and I extend my deepest condolences to the families of those we lost." He didn't mention Maya. Not once. Frank paced the living room. He knows he's protecting someone. Rachel didn't argue. She sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. Maya stood at the window, notebook in hand. He didn't say anything because if he does, they'll blame him. Frank turned to her. You think he's scared? She nodded. He's alone now. The next day, Carter came to their house. No cameras, no car entourage, just a man in a dark sweater, a quiet knock, and a storm behind his eyes. Frank opened the door, didn't say a word. Carter nodded. Can I come in? They sat at the kitchen table. Rachel hovered in the doorway. Maya sat silently, swinging her legs. Carter spoke first. I remember your father, Coleman. He warned me once about the TriStar's instability at altitude. I dismissed it. I thought he was being paranoid. He placed a small scorched metal object on the table in a clear bag. They found this embedded in the tail assembly. Tampered bolt, hollowed out. It didn't fail. It was made to. Frank's face hardened. Sabotage. Carter nodded. Or cover up. Either way, someone made sure this would look like an accident. He turned to Maya. You tried to stop me. I didn't listen. I should have. Maya whispered, I was loud. He smiled. Tired. You were just not loud enough to drown out $1 million machine. There was a long pause. Then Frank reached into the cabinet and pulled out a weathered tin box. Inside, wrapped in a cloth, was an old USB stick. He gave this to me before he died, Frank said. Told me never to open it unless something didn't feel right. Carter stared. What's on it? Frank looked at Maya. Let's find out. That night, Maya sat cross-legged in front of the laptop. Carter and Frank beside her. Rachel nearby, arms crossed, trying not to hover. The files opened slow. Technical schematics, pilot reports, emails. One folder stood out. G4 TriStar revision. Inside, dozens of documents, all flagged, all ignored. A single line typed in bold by Coleman Williams 5 years ago. Flight at or above 19,000 feet risks catastrophic actuator destabilization if bolt fatigue is present. Maya whispered, he knew. He tried to warn them. Frank murmured, he wasn't the only one anymore. Carter leaned back. This isn't just about a plane. It's about the people who let it happen. And in that moment, even Maya, 8 years old, ponytail tangled, eyes red from hours of reading, understood. This wasn't over. This was just takeoff. The only light in the room came from the soft glow of Maya's laptop screen. She sat cross-legged in her chair, her small fingers flipping through the pages of her worn notebook. Beside her, Frank stood with arms crossed, his expression tight. Carter leaned in closer, scanning the files one after another. The USB her father left behind was full of technical documents, schematics, flight test logs, internal memos, all bearing the same warning signs. One file labeled G4 TriStar Revision opened with a flashing red note written by Coleman Williams. At or above 19,000 feet rudder system instability due to actuator failure. Confirmed. Ignored. Maya pointed at the line with a trembling finger. He knew. He saw it coming. Carter's eyes narrowed as he scrolled. And somebody buried this intentionally. Frank stepped forward. This wasn't corporate laziness. This was deliberate suppression. Maya turned a page in her notebook. Dad made me write this part down. He said, if it ever disappears on a screen, it'll still live on paper. Her voice was quiet but clear, as if even now she was repeating a lesson. Carter sat back in his chair, the weight of what he was reading finally settling on his shoulders. These aren't just warnings. These are damning names, dates, component logs. This is proof. Maya looked up at him. But if we send this to the FAA, will they do anything? Frank answered before Carter could. Maybe. But it won't be fast, and it won't be clean. Carter rubbed his temples. I have contacts in the Senate Oversight Committee. They'll listen, but only if this goes public first. If we make this loud enough, they'll have no choice. Maya nodded slowly. Then we make noise. Later that night, on the quiet back porch, Maya sat wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. Frank sat beside her, sipping from his old tin coffee cup. He broke the silence first. You okay, kiddo? Maya didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, I'm scared. Not of them, but of people forgetting. Like they forgot Dad. Frank looked out over the yard. They won't forget. Not this time. Not if we don't let them. She glanced up. Do you think he knew he wouldn't come back? Frank's jaw clenched. Then he nodded. Yeah, I think he knew. And I think that's why he left it all behind. Not for me. For you. Maya pulled her knees up to her chest. The crickets chirped in the grass and a single plane blinked across the night sky. She followed it with her eyes, then spoke in a voice more certain than her years. Then I won't let him be a whisper. I'll make sure he's heard. Inside, Carter was already on a secure call. Nancy Rodas had answered. A seasoned investigative journalist with a sharp tongue and no tolerance for corporate lies. She's 8? Nancy asked, incredulous. Carter replied, she's sharper than most engineers I've hired. Nancy paused. Send everything you've got. I'll meet you in person. When the call ended, Carter looked toward the window where Maya sat in the moonlight, her small silhouette outlined against the dark. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought clung to him like static. The truth didn't need to shout. Not when it came from the only voice no one expected, and that's what made it powerful. The next morning, the sun rose over Tampa, but the Williams household remained quiet. A strange calm settled over them as if the air itself was holding its breath. Maya sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by scattered diagrams, handwritten notes, and the worn pages of her notebook. Her hair was still messy from sleep, but her eyes were wide awake, focused. Frank poured her a glass of orange juice and set it down gently beside her. Eat something, he said. You'll need your strength. She looked up and gave a tiny nod, then went right back to copying a page of flight data from her father's files. In the corner of the living room, Carter was on the phone again. His voice was low, urgent, steady. We've got enough to bury them, he said. But it only matters if people see it. An hour later, Nancy Rodas arrived. She stepped out of a silver Toyota wearing jeans, a navy windbreaker, and a press badge clipped to her belt. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the house before she even knocked. When Frank opened the door, she nodded once. Let's get to work. Inside, the house turned into a war room. Nancy spread out documents on the dining table, laid her recorder next to Maya's notebook, and set up her laptop to start copying files. I've covered aerospace for 20 years, she said. I've seen shady, but this is engineered silence. She turned to Maya, who watched her carefully. You sure you're up for this, kiddo? Maya straightened her back. They ignored my dad. They almost ignored me. I won't let them do it again. Nancy smirked. Good answer. Later that day, Carter drove Maya and Nancy to a small media studio on the outskirts of downtown. It wasn't much, just a converted warehouse with a green screen, 2 cameras, and a single lav mic, but it was enough. Nancy sat in front of the camera first, delivering a quick summary of the crash, the ignored warnings, and the files retrieved from Coleman Williams's archive. Then it was Maya's turn. She sat in the tall chair, feet dangling, hands clutching her notebook. The lights were bright, but she didn't flinch. When the red recording light turned on, she looked directly at the lens. My name is Maya Williams. I'm 8 years old. My dad died in a plane crash 5 years ago. Everyone said it was an accident. But he knew something was wrong with that plane. He tried to tell people. No one listened. She opened the notebook and turned it to the camera. This is what he left me. It's full of notes about the G4 TriStar, about how it shakes in the wind, about how the rudder fails at high altitudes. He called it sabotage. Her voice didn't waver. I saw the signal on my walkie-talkie before the crash. I told them, they laughed. I screamed. They didn't stop. She paused, her small voice suddenly iron. They stopped listening, but I didn't stop watching. Nancy whispered off camera. Perfect. That evening, they uploaded the video to every platform they could. YouTube, local news sites, social media. Nancy attached every document they had, every chart, every diagram, and within hours, the internet did what it does best. It caught fire. Maya's right began trending nationwide. Veteran pilots commented. Engineers reposted the video with breakdowns of the flaws Maya pointed to. Flight instructors shared stories of odd behavior in the TriStar systems. Some even admitted they'd raised concerns and been ignored. By the next morning, a whistleblower from inside Stratdean had contacted Nancy anonymously. In his message was a single line. She's telling the truth they've known for years. Attached were internal memos, emails, and budget reports. And at the bottom of one document, a phrase that chilled Carter to the bone. Asset risk. Acceptable loss. Projected less than 3 lives per million flight hours. Frank read it aloud in disbelief. They did the math on people. Maya looked up from her notebook, her voice quiet but firm. Then it's time we do the math on justice. Nancy nodded. We go public tomorrow. Press conference, cameras, live broadcast. Carter looked at Maya. You don't have to do this if you're scared. Maya shook her head. I'm not scared. I'm ready. And in that small, quiet house on the edge of Tampa, a child became the storm they never saw coming. At exactly 10 a.m., the press conference began. The room was small, tucked inside the community center near downtown Tampa. Folding chairs lined the carpet. Cameras stood like sentinels at the back wall, and reporters whispered over notepads. There were no politicians, no stage lights, no red carpet. But everyone knew this was the moment. Nancy Rhoda stepped to the microphone first, calm, steady, composed. "Thank you for coming. Today, we're not just talking about a plane crash. We're talking about a cover-up, about warnings ignored, about voices silenced." She turned and gestured toward the small figure seated behind her, and about a little girl who refused to stay quiet. Maya rose from her chair and walked slowly to the podium. She wore a simple white dress, her notebook tucked under one arm, and her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. The microphone had to be lowered for her. "My name is Maya Williams," she began, her voice clear, young, and steady. "I'm 8 years old. My dad was Coleman Williams. He was an engineer. He loved airplanes. And he died in one." Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned in. "He told me before he died that something wasn't right with the planes he worked on. He showed me how to listen to radio frequencies. He said, sometimes machines speak in whispers. You just have to be quiet enough to hear them." She opened her notebook, flipping to a page filled with numbers and hand-drawn diagrams. "On the day of the crash, I heard one of those whispers. The signal was wrong. I ran onto the runway. I screamed for them to stop. They didn't." She looked up, her eyes shining but fierce. 4 people lived because we didn't get on that plane. Everyone else didn't make it." Nancy stepped forward and handed her a small recorder. Maya pressed play. From the speakers came a faint but chilling sound, an irregular pulse, sharp and unnatural. "This is what I heard that day. My dad trained me to recognize this pattern. It means interference. It means danger." Carter Ellison stepped up next. His voice low and heavy. "I was on that plane. I survived, but I should have listened. Maya warned us. And she wasn't the only one. Her father warned us years ago. His reports were buried. His voice was silenced. No more." He pulled out a printed email, holding it high. "This came from inside Stratdene. It proves they knew. It proves they accepted the risk, that they allowed faulty bolts in the rudder system to save money. They even calculated acceptable death rates per flight hour." Gasps rippled through the room. Nancy returned to the mic. "We are calling for a full federal investigation into Stratdene Systems and any agency or official who allowed this design flaw to go unchecked." She turned to Maya. "And she's the one who made it all possible." As the room erupted in questions, one reporter stood and asked, "Maya, what do you want to happen now?" Maya paused. Then she walked back to the mic and said softly, but with conviction, "I want people to listen, not just to me, but to everyone who's ever been told they were too small to matter. Because the truth isn't big or loud. It just waits for someone to believe in it." The video went viral before the press conference even ended. Within an hour, national news stations replayed her speech in full. Pilots grounded TriStar planes. Engineers began leaking more documents. Whistleblowers stepped forward. By nightfall, the Department of Transportation announced an emergency review of all certifications involving Stratdene aircraft. And at home, as Maya curled up on the couch with her notebook, Frank placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kiddo." Maya smiled just a little. "Dad would have done more." Frank looked at her. "Maybe, but he didn't have you." Outside, the wind shifted. The sky above Tampa was dark, but not heavy because something had broken through. Not noise, not power, just a single unstoppable voice from BUP Stories. 3 days after the press conference, the storm rolled in. Thick clouds, relentless rain, and something darker in the air that had nothing to do with weather. The Williams house stood quiet, but inside, tension crackled like static. The media had camped outside for nearly 2 days straight. News vans lined the street. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Reporters shouted questions from the sidewalk. Rachel kept the curtains drawn. Frank had taken to sleeping in the living room, a baseball bat within reach. And Maya kept writing. She sat at the kitchen table, her notebook open, carefully copying her father's diagrams into a fresh binder. Her handwriting had become neater, more deliberate, focused. She didn't look scared, just determined. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. This time, it wasn't the press. A woman stepped out, short, mid-40s with sharp eyes and a badge that glinted under the porch light. She knocked firmly. "Agent Lena Ruiz, Federal Aviation Authority. I'm here to talk." They let her in. She sat at the dining table across from Maya, Carter, and Frank, flipping open a file folder with a practiced hand. "We've opened an official investigation. Your testimony, Maya, and the documentation provided by Ms. Rodas have already triggered internal audits, but I'm going to be honest with you." She leaned in slightly. "There are people in very high places who want this buried again, quickly." Rachel stiffened. "Is that a threat?" Ruiz shook her head. "It's a fact, but not one I intend to let stand." She slid a photo across the table. It showed a mailbox, their mailbox, with what looked like thin wire and black residue tucked underneath. "We intercepted this before it went off. Time to trigger on pressure, designed to intimidate, maybe worse." Rachel's face went pale. Maya didn't flinch. She just whispered, "They're scared of the truth." Ruiz looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes, they are, and that's why you need to stay visible. Keep the public watching. That's your best protection." Now, after Ruiz left, silence returned. But it wasn't fear that settled in. It was resolve. That night, Frank climbed into the attic and returned with a box Maya had never seen. Inside were her father's old Air Force patches, his flight gloves, and a tiny cassette recorder. Frank held it up. "He made this the week before he died. I never played it. Couldn't." Maya reached out and pressed the play button. Her father's voice, rough but steady, filled the room. "If you're hearing this, then something's gone wrong. The TriStar is dangerous. Not because it's flawed, but because someone wants it to be. They're pushing unstable builds, cutting costs. The numbers don't lie. I've done what I can to document it. If I don't make it home, promise me this gets out. Promise me someone will listen." The tape clicked off. No one spoke for a long time. Then Maya said, "He knew, and now we do." Carter stood. "We need to go bigger. National Senate bigger." Nancy Rodas called the next morning. Her voice was shaken. "They wiped everything, Maya. My backup servers, the cloud, even my old email accounts, like I never existed." Maya's grip on the phone tightened. "But you have the originals, right?" "I kept hard copies," Nancy replied. "But this is next level. This isn't just corporate suppression. This is federal level erasure. Someone with power is pulling strings." Maya closed her notebook and looked up at Carter and Frank. "Then we go to the people. The bigger the truth, the more eyes we need on it." Frank gave her a small nod. "And more voices willing to speak it." That night, Maya recorded another video. Just her alone in her room speaking into the lens. "My name is Maya Williams. I'm 8 years old. I know I'm not supposed to matter. I know some people think I should go away now that the story's out, but I won't because my dad's voice wasn't a mistake, and neither is mine. If you're hearing this, it means you still care. Don't let them turn this into silence again. Don't let them make this go away." She posted it. Within hours, it was everywhere. People didn't just listen. They responded. Veterans, pilots, mechanics, parents, kids. One comment stood out. "If an 8-year-old can stand up to them, so can we." And in a darkened room lit by a single lamp and a sleeping town outside, Maya smiled for the first time in days. The storm might rage outside, but inside her, the sky had never been clearer from BUP stories. The invitation came in a white envelope with a gold seal, formal, official, and unmistakably strategic. It wasn't a court summons or a subpoena. It was something far more public, the Ellison Jet Capital annual shareholder meeting, and Maya's name was on the list. Carter placed the envelope on the kitchen table like it was radioactive. "This isn't an olive branch," he said. "It's a trap, a PR move. They want to make it look like they're listening. But they'll try to discredit her the second she speaks." Frank sipped his coffee, eyes steady. "Then let them try." Rachel frowned, protective, but tired. "She's 8. Maya looked up from her notebook. "And they're not." The room fell quiet. Carter leaned forward. "You don't have to do this, Maya." She met his gaze without blinking. "I know. That's why I'm going." The day of the meeting, the lobby of Ellison Jet Capital headquarters gleamed like a museum. Marble floors, glass walls, suits everywhere. Executives moved like sharks in a tank. All smiles and tight handshakes. But when Maya walked through the front doors holding Frank's hand, the entire room shifted. Conversations paused. Eyes followed her. She wore a simple navy dress. Her notebook in her arms like a shield. Carter met them near the elevator, flanked by 2 security personnel who clearly weren't on his side. "You sure?" he asked her. Maya nodded. "They're not the only ones who came prepared." Inside the boardroom, the meeting had already begun. At the head of the table sat Martin Gray, interim chairman, with silver hair and a face carved from stone. He looked at Maya with the practiced calm of a man used to controlling the room. Our next guest, he said into the microphone, is the young lady who's captured the nation's attention, Maya Williams. Maya stepped forward. No podium, no booster seat, just her in the room. She placed her notebook on the table, then opened it. My dad worked for this company, she began, her voice small but unshaking. He died trying to fix a problem you pretended didn't exist. He warned you. You buried him with your silence. Gasps rippled through the room. Martin Gray's smile tightened. She turned to the board. You told the public it was an accident. You told the families it was weather. You told the FAA it was a fluke. But the files my father left behind tell the truth. And so do the ones your employees leaked. She flipped to a page and held it up, a hand-drawn diagram of the G4 TriStar rudder assembly marked in red. This isn't a child's drawing. It's an engineer's warning. Martin leaned forward. Miss Williams, with all due respect, we're not here to debate engineering reports. This is a shareholder meeting. Carter stood. Then let's talk about value, because silencing the truth has cost this company more than dollars. It's cost lives. Trust. Integrity. Martin snapped. You were removed from your position, Mr. Ellison. You no longer speak for this company. Carter smiled faintly. Maybe not, but I still own 17% of it. The room stirred. Board members whispered. Maya stepped closer to the mic. You can remove people from titles, but you can't remove the truth. It lives here in this notebook. In every pilot who spoke up, in every mechanic who walked away, in every family who didn't get to say goodbye. The room went dead quiet. Then softly, Carter placed a folder on the table. Inside are the names of engineers who were silenced, pilots grounded for speaking up, and emails showing active suppression of safety reports. He looked at Martin. You can ignore her, but you can't ignore this. Gray stood, his face red. This meeting is over. He turned to leave, but the cameras, quietly invited by Nancy Rodas, were already rolling. Outside the boardroom, reporters swarmed. News outlets live-streamed the confrontation. By nightfall, the footage had gone viral. Notebook of Truth. Maya versus the board. She did not back down. Maya watched it from the living room couch, her legs curled under her. Frank snoring softly beside her. Rachel wiped away tears she didn't try to hide. Carter called just after midnight. They're panicking, he said. They've called an emergency board session. They're talking resignation, restructuring, even pulling TriStar from the market. Maya didn't say much. Just one sentence. They finally heard him. Frank opened one eye. He'd be proud of you, baby girl. Maya looked out the window toward the night sky. He'd be proud that someone finally listened from BUP stories. The ripple effects of the boardroom confrontation were immediate. By sunrise, Ellison Jet Capital stock had dropped 12%. By noon, 3 board members had resigned. By nightfall, the FAA announced a full audit of every G4 TriStar aircraft still in circulation. But to Maya, none of it felt like victory. Not yet. She sat on the back porch, legs swinging, notebook open on her lap. The pages were worn now, corners bent, ink smudged in places. Her father's notes had become part of her hands, her breath, her voice. Frank joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He handed one to her and sat beside her in the creaky old chair. "World's changing fast," he said. She nodded, but not enough. He looked at her, curious. "What are you still waiting for?" She tapped a page in the notebook. Consequences. The next morning, it came. A breaking news alert flashed across every screen in the Williams house. Nancy's voice came through the TV live from Washington, D.C. This morning, the Department of Justice filed charges against Stratdean Systems and several high-level executives, citing willful negligence, obstruction of federal oversight, and conspiracy to suppress safety data. Maya's heart thudded in her chest. Carter appeared on screen next outside a federal building. His face was tired, but this time he didn't look burdened. He looked free. "They called it acceptable risk," he said to the press. "But there is no number that justifies a lost life, and there's no model that can account for a little girl with a notebook and a memory." The news spread like wildfire. Cable shows ran segments titled "The 8-Year-Old Who Grounded a Jet Fleet." Magazine covers featured Maya holding her notebook, standing next to Carter in front of the Capitol steps. Schools invited her to speak. Journalists called non-stop. And yet, in the middle of it all, Maya asked for one thing: to fly. Carter arranged it quietly. A small training flight at Tampa Executive Airport, the same place where it had all begun. The plane was modest, a 2-seater with a silver sheen and a name freshly painted on its side, the Coleman Star. As the instructor adjusted the seat harness, Frank stood back with Rachel, watching Maya climb in. "She's too young," Rachel whispered, half nervous, half proud. Frank shook his head. "She's already flown higher than most adults ever will." Inside the cockpit, Maya placed her notebook on the dashboard just for luck. The engine hummed to life, the propellers spinning faster, louder until the earth seemed to tremble beneath them. The instructor gave her thumbs up. Maya returned it. As the plane rolled forward, wind sweeping through the open tarmac, she whispered to herself. "He said, machines don't lie, but people do. And when the truth speaks, you fly it forward." The wheels left the ground. She didn't look back. The clouds above opened like an invitation. And for the first time since her father's voice fell silent, Maya felt weightless, not just from the sky, from the truth that had finally been set free from BUP stories. The following weeks unfolded like scenes from someone else's life. Maya received letters from across the country. Pilots, widows, engineers, students. Some had lost family members to TriStar crashes. Others simply wrote to say they believed her, that they believed in her. Frank kept the envelopes in a shoebox. Rachel framed the first letter and hung it in the hallway. But Maya never stopped carrying the notebook. Even when the headlines faded, even when the news moved on, she still opened it every night. Sometimes just to touch the pages. Sometimes to reread her father's final notes, as if they still whispered something new. Then one day, a second letter arrived. This one bore the seal of the Senate Subcommittee on Transportation Oversight. Inside, a single line. "You are formally invited to testify." Rachel's hands trembled as she read it aloud. "They want her in Washington." Frank looked at Maya. "You ready?" She nodded, eyes clear. It's not about being ready. It's about being right. The capital was colder than she expected. All stone and silence and marble that echoed under your feet. But Maya didn't flinch. She wore the same navy dress from the shareholder meeting. Her notebook clutched close to her chest. Inside the chamber, cameras blinked. Reporters watched. Senators leaned forward. Maya sat at the long table beside Carter and Nancy. Her feet didn't touch the floor, but her words reached every corner of the room. "My name is Maya Williams," she began. "I'm 8 years old, and I came here because my father saw something dangerous. He spoke up. He died before anyone listened." She held up the notebook. "This is his voice. I've been carrying it since the day he left. Not because I wanted to, because no one else would." The chamber fell still. She flipped to a page marked with red ink. "These are his calculations on rudder failure. They weren't hidden because they were wrong. They were hidden because they were true." One senator leaned forward. "Miss Williams, what do you want from this committee?" Maya looked him in the eye. "I want accountability. I want safety. I want the next kid who hears something wrong to know they'll be believed. I want my dad's voice to matter." When she finished, the room erupted in quiet applause. Not the performative kind. The kind that carried weight. Respect. Outside, reporters flooded her with questions, but Maya didn't stop for them. Not this time. That night in their quiet hotel room overlooking the city, Maya stood at the window with Frank beside her. "The stars look different here," she whispered. Frank nodded. "They're further away, but they still shine." Weeks later, a bill was signed into law, the Coleman Act. It reformed federal aviation reporting, increased protections for whistleblowers, and mandated immediate investigation into all system alerts, no matter the source. Even if the source was a child. The day the law passed, Carter handed Maya a small wooden plaque. It read, "Truth doesn't need volume. It needs courage." Beneath that was her father's name and hers. The following spring, Maya returned to the airstrip. She stood beside a new plane, its silver wings gleaming in the morning sun. The name on its side, the Whisper One. This time she flew alone, high above the trees, above the clouds, above the noise of the world. Maya closed her eyes and whispered one last message into her headset. "Dad, we did it." They listened. And somewhere above the clouds, the sky remembered from BUP stories.